Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Cosmic Conversations. I am your host, Julia Phoenix, and today I have with me Carolina Arco. She is a spiritual mentor and just an incredible, beautiful soul. I'm so excited to have you on. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Julie. I'm so happy to be here and talking to you today.
Yay! I'm so happy too. And I found Carolina on Carolini. I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
Name is Carolini. Um, I found Carolini on a Facebook group, and just immediately I felt your energy and felt such a strong resonance, and just what you were sharing about so briefly about your work with New Earth leaders hit me so strong. I could feel that there was so much overlap and compatibility in our work. And then we had a phenomenal conversation. And so I'm really excited to share today and to connect with you today, especially around the topic of New Earth leadership. Um, but I would love if you would just maybe share a little bit about yourself. You also shared with me a teeny bit about your story, and I just thought it was so beautiful and so valuable. So, as much as or as little as you want to share, how did you get into this whole thing, into doing what you're doing now, mentoring so many beautiful beings all across the globe?
Thank you so much for your kind words. Yeah, I'll try to keep it nice and brief, but just to give a little bit of a background of, how all of this came to be. But basically, I grew up in the south of Brazil. And during my childhood, I've always had like very intense spiritual experiences. And I think, as much as they happened when I was very young, by the time that I was 7 years old, I also went through a big period of depression, like childhood depression, where something really awoke inside of me, an ability to connect to different kinds of realms and to explore different levels of consciousness.
Hmm.
So I remember being very, very young and, locking myself in my bedroom and just exploring with like, where could I go inside my brain and thinking about the universe and the nature of reality and just having these like really big thoughts. And it was kind of like a safe haven for me to be in that state as a child.
Hmm.
So, I think it's always something that has been with me, but as we know, we don't live in a society that inspires or supports children to develop their abilities that much.
Hmm.
So I grew up and I left home when I was 18 years old and did some traveling here and there and a lot of really beautiful stories in the middle of that. But eventually, by the time that I was 23, I arrived in Canada. I'm from a very small town south of Brazil. And somehow, I got this opportunity to do a scholarship in Canada for 6 months. So I arrived in Canada as a young immigrant. I really didn't know anybody and did my scholarship. And after I graduated, I kind of fell into this place of like, I have no idea who I am. I have no idea what I want to do in life. I once again like was hit with like a really big level of depression and just felt that I had nothing to amount to anything, like I had no, I didn't see my value or my worth or any of these things.
Hmm.
And it's crazy to think about that now because, now my life is all about purpose and is all about a big vision and is all about like knowing your place in the world and, living like it. And it's so interesting to think that at some point that felt so distant to me.
Yeah.
But when I was right in the middle of that, I was very open to help. At some point I kind of like gave up and I'm like, well, I know that I need help, but I don't know exactly what kind of help I need. And I remember there was this clear moment that I asked for help. I was like, send me something, I need a lifeline here. Otherwise I don't know how this can go forward. And
Hmm.
very shortly after that, I was walking through this shopping mall, on a Monday afternoon, kind of like a random thing. And I saw a sign that read 15-minute Reiki sessions. And I was like, Reiki, I didn't even know what it was, but it kind of like sparked my interest. And I'm like, okay, sure, I'll do this session. And the lady brought me in to the back of her shop and put her hands over me. And I was completely gone. In 15 minutes, I was just like totally out of my body, went to a place where there was no thoughts, no emotions, no form. It was just like pure purity. It was, complete purity.
Hmm.
And I could swear to God that I was there for 4 hours. If anybody asked me, I was there for 4 hours. So when the lady brought me back and I asked her, I was like, wow, you left me there for a very long time, right? Like, she's like, no, no, that was a 15-minute session. And my mind was completely blown.
Yeah.
Like, how is this possible? What has happened to me? I need to learn about this. I need to get involved on this. And so Reiki at the beginning was very much my entry point to once again reconnecting to my spirituality and getting back into that sense of perspective and expansion that I used to have as a child.
Mm.
And, I started doing the Reiki trainings, like mostly to heal myself. And at the time I was working in a restaurant making sandwiches. I was tied to that place to have my visa in Canada, right? So I couldn't really leave. I felt like a slave, day in, day out, like working at 5 o'clock in the morning, biking through the snow to open a restaurant to make I don't know how many sandwiches a day to then go home. Like it was a very like monotonous and like sad experience at the time for me. And I had this thing on the side. There was this Reiki thing that on Monday nights I would go and I would have these Reiki moments, and all these memories would come back, and I would have these crazy beautiful experiences. And so it became such an interesting thing where like my daily life felt like this dull
Mm.
gray thing, but at the same time I was discovering this very colorful, expansive world. And basically, the more that I did that and the more that I put myself into my own process of self-healing, people around me started noticing that something was changing. And they started asking, what is this thing that you're doing? What is this Reiki thing? And I'm like, well, it's just something that I do for myself. They're like, well, do a session for me. I'm like, sure, I guess I can do that. I've never done it for anybody, but I guess I can do that. And for my very first sessions, it was very clear that we were accessing very high elevated states of consciousness in the name of that client, and like some big shifts were happening um, when we were opening that field with first what was considered Reiki, and now of course is a variety of different modalities that can't even fit into a name. That's basically what I offer. So very organically, this practice is starting to grow, and I started to have a clientele and decided to go online and start sharing the things that Spirit was telling me, and the things that I was learning, and started cultivating a community that way. And so it just kind of happened that 7 years later, I've been a full-time spiritual healer, mentor, whatever you want to call it, for 7 years now, and have had over 4,000 people coming through my experiences, whether they were, free experiences, paid experiences, have had hundreds of one-on-one clients. And now I'm really kind of accepting my role and my place as a leaders for the leaders of the new earth, right? Like as somebody who is really here to bridge heaven and earth and to support each other, support the light leaders as we're all feeling this call together.
Mm.
Um, so that's a little bit of my story.
So beautiful. I just love listening to you talk in general, but it's such a I think it's such a beautiful story. It's very different than mine, but I also think it's something that a lot of people can relate to. I know a lot of people who for whom Reiki was their entry point to their gifts or to, the spiritual realm, to energy work. And I think also what really stood out for me is when you were talking about kind of the dissonance between like your daily life and then you're like doing this kind of spiritual thing over here on the side and it's like really kind of separate and you know um and kind of that's like a phase I think that a lot of people go through where you're trying to integrate it, like how does this fit into my life, like how do I make this more um an embodied experience that is a part of my entire life, and also sharing about the gifts and the portals of remembrance that were opening for you once you began practicing. I think that happens for a lot of people as well, and so I think it's really valuable that you share, because I can't tell you too how many people I've sat with that they were trained in Reiki and then they're like, I feel like I'm doing something different than that, like
Mhm.
more is opening for me. I don't necessarily know what it is. Um, and I think, yeah, I think that there's just an expansion that can come from a modality or practice like that. And it's important to know that we don't have to stay boxed in to what we were trained in. Um, So thank you so much for sharing that. And I would love to hear a little bit about kind of what your work looks like now in terms of like, how do you, well, actually, let's go here first. I want to ask for your definition when you talk about new earth leadership. Like that term for anyone who, I mean, people might have their own ideas about what it is, but to you, what does that mean?
Mhm. Yeah, so that's a great question. So new earth leadership, I think, to really explore that, we kind of had to decide to define what is a leader, and for me, what a leader means is a leader is somebody who has a vision. So they have a north, like they are going somewhere and they know where they're going. And that
Mm,
for me, is it would what would categorize a leader. Ideally, that person, because they have that clear vision, they're also inspiring others to come along because clarity is a very magnetic thing.
yeah.
And so by default or intentionally, like they're creating a movement surrounding that vision towards that vision. Um, and I think that that would be for me the definition of a leader. Now, when we're talking about new earth, then we have to clarify, well, what is the vision that we have for the new earth then? Right? If we're being leaders in the name of the new earth, then what is the new earth as we say it, as we see it? And for me, the new earth is a state of operation, a state of being for us as human is almost like a new operational system
Mm,
that we perform through as humans interacting with Mother Earth, with the planet, right? That is based on a high level of connection with the elements, a high level of connection with the subtle nature of reality. So, like, quantum physics, frequencies, light, all of those elements.
mhm,
And that is united by the values of love, peace, harmony
mhm.
as a whole. And we can, there's more values that we can talk about it, but I would
Yeah,
kind of.
so then new earth leaders would probably be also beings who are connected to those frequencies, who embody and hold those values and those frequencies and are connected also to these other realms of experience and perception, correct?
Exactly. I see new earth leaders as the kinds of humans who are already operating in a new way, in a different way that has these shared values
Mm,
and that are, literally being the embodiment of that vision as
yeah.
is being created. Because it is very much a new paradigm. We look around us right now, and you can say that we don't live in a world of unity. We don't live in a world of love and we don't live in a world of harmony. So there is a new paradigm that basically, when you're living through these contexts of love, peace, and harmony, it changes every area of your life. It becomes a filter. Every area of your life has to go through this filter of, is this in alignment with love, peace, and harmony? Is this in alignment with love, peace, and harmony? And you start to operate in a new way to be that. And that for me is new earth leadership, is you put yourself first to live in a new way
Yes. Yeah.
in service to the higher vision. Mhm.
Yeah. And so then you are anchoring that frequency, you are being an example and
Mhm.
expressing and showing the way through your embodiment. That's how I look at it and what you're saying. I love that definition. Beautiful definition. So then, that sort of flows into um, how do you assist new earth leaders? And I'm curious about this, not just because I'm curious about your work, but also because I think it's helpful to understand like what could be some things that new earth leaders need assistance with, because sometimes
Mhm.
there's an idea that it's like we should just be able to do all of this on our own without support. um so yeah, I would love if you could speak a bit more into that.
Mhm. Um, yeah, so basically my work is supporting people into stepping into a new paradigm of creation for themselves,
Mm,
right? So a huge challenge that we have as awoken beings, light workers, whatever you want to call it, is that we have this feeling that there's something out there that is very grand, right? We have this feeling that manifestation is a very real thing. We have this feeling that there is, the 5D, the quantum, whatever you want to call it, we feel it. But
Yeah.
a lot of the times in our daily 3D life, that feels so far away, as you were talking about before.
Yeah.
And so for so many of us, we're going to have to. Thank you, Zoom, for the fireworks. Zoom loves giving me fireworks. Do not ask me why. I have no idea what I do.
It was definitely a point of emphasis, I think.
Yeah. Um, so I help people really channel and embody and be the codes of the new paradigm in every area of their life. So, if we're talking about something like abundance and scarcity, for an example, it's a very simple example.
Yeah.
So many of us, it's so easy to get trapped into scarcity because in the 3D world, that's what we see around us. We interact with resources in this like way of exchanging 1 unit of effort by 1 unit of
Mm.
resource. It's a very mechanical, like Newtonian physics sort of exchange.
Yeah.
And when we are stuck into that way of creation, like, we brings all kinds of problems and we start attaching our worth to everything, blah, blah, blah. We know how that goes, right?
Yeah.
So I help people, for an example, connect to a state of abundance that is unconditional to effort, that is innate to our state of being
Mm.
by understanding frequency, by understanding the nature of reality, right? And by grounding ourselves into a state of more trust than fear,
Mm.
like more faith than fear. And when you kind of go through every area of life and you do this kind of work through every area of life of like, where is the old programming, like where am I still operating in a way that has been fed onto me, but it's not really mine? And you
Mm.
update that programming, then every area of life changes, from the way that you perform your purpose to the way that you have your career, to your relationships, to the way that you care for your body. Everything gets updated into a new paradigm.
Yes.
Um, I call it frequency first, like the frequency first paradigm, because you are creating by frequency. You understand what frequency is. You understand that all of reality is made of frequency first. And instead of trying to just shape reality through effort and through the outside circumstances, you shape frequency. You speak
Absolutely.
frequency.
Yes. Yes. You're totally speaking my language. I love this. And it's also so much in alignment with the work that I do with DNA activation and, the energy body and everything. It's so much about that. And I really love the example that you used too. And just to kind of poke in there a little bit more, it's like I really see that the scarcity paradigms are one of the things that hangs people who are meant to be new earth leaders up,
Yes.
really can, and it can also create weird distortions in our work, because if you're
Mhm.
coming from a place of um, there's not enough and I need to get more to survive, or I need to go get it, or whatever. Like there's all kinds of stuff. And I know we were talking a little bit before about how we've kind of seen this in our industry, but there's all kinds of stuff that can happen when you're operating from that paradigm that it's like it distorts the work. It's not really what you're here to do. It's not
Mhm.
really what you're here to hold and transmit. Um, and it also causes yeah, just a state of disconnection, when we're not in that full faith and that full trust, when we're under resourced,
Yes.
when we're feeling depleted, when we're feeling scared about the future. It's really hard to hold that energy that we need to hold to be guiding people and to be moving towards that bigger vision. So I think it's so foundational and important work.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for speaking into that. I think is a real challenge for many of us light workers, because the calling of the light worker or the light leader, whatever you want to call it, is really to look at those things,
Yes.
right? Is all of those things that have been on the background of humanity, that have like these generational curses per se, that have been like controlling things in a very subconscious way. And our call is to really look at those. So it means that we feel it more, like we
Mm-hmm.
feel the scarcity more than the average human being, because we also see the potential for it to not be there. We also see the potential for abundance, but it's almost like we need to face those things head on in order to create a new from them, right? Like that alchemical process. um so yeah, there's obviously no shame in experiencing scarcity. There's no shame in going through all of these, but it's different when you go through it with the context of I'm here to alchemize it. That's why I'm seeing it the way that I'm seeing it. That's why it's showing up so clearly to me, because I'm meant to alchemize it, because I'm meant to create a new way around this.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I've heard it said that leaders go first is a, it's that's a phrase. It's something that I have seen to be true. And um I also feel that it's like when we confront, like that's the call of leadership. Like we have to confront all the things. We have to confront it in ourselves. And often we're doing it first, we're transmuting it, we're kind of integrating the new codes. So then not only can we transmit the new codes, but we can also guide people in their
Mm-hmm.
own process of alchemy. We're like, hey, I've got the map, you know,
Yeah.
just like you're doing with people. I've kind of got the map. I can hold you through that process. Um and that's really the way it works. It's like little by slow, we really shift the collective frequency around these things. And I think this is just one example, but that is something that it causes a lot in the collective and on our planet. It causes so much that isn't in alignment with where we're wanting to be and where we're wanting to go.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's the work as well, is that we're always going to be walking side by side with fear, right? And scarcity is nothing more than fear, as most of the things that we find on this path is nothing more than fear, right? And is that really always, I think that's really what's happening to us as well, is that we have had a biology, like a physical body that was made to survive. And survival for our reptilian brain is its main goal, right? And is the most important thing. And so our physical body is in this search for survival, while we already had an upgrade in consciousness, and our consciousness is now really interested in thriving.
Yeah.
So through the work that you're doing, like the DNA activations and all of that, you're literally catching the body up, like we're talking before, right? Like the
Yeah.
body needs to catch up, the reptilian brain needs to catch up
Absolutely.
to this new state of like, okay, we get to thrive from here. Because if not, then we continue perpetuating the same systems that just keep people stuck in survival.
Yeah. Absolutely. And there's so much to there's so much to this, because it's like it's also the ancestral patterning that we carry in that DNA. It is past life stuff. It is I know you work in these realms, but it is also just in the collective field, and we're interacting with the world day to day and interacting in relationships in our life, and in taking media or whatever, social media, that tends to reinforce these certain patterns, like, oh yeah, you should be scared, it's really
Yeah.
scarce out there, it's really not safe. And so you're like, really, you're sorting through a lot of that. And it takes, it's coming through just to say now, is like, I think it takes a lot of bravery, and it takes a lot of heart, and it takes a strong commitment, to really do
Oh, yeah.
that work, and to say, I'm going to hold this energy.
Absolutely. And I think that's what defines like the light workers from the light leaders, is that the light leaders, they're just so committed on holding that vision of hope, like just
Yes.
unshakable commitments. Is like heaven on earth. This is where we're going here. That's no other option. Like we are going to heaven on earth. That's the blueprint that we're bringing, right? That's the blueprint that I'm bringing for myself. That's the blueprint that I'm supporting you bring for you. That's the blueprint that we're bringing for the earth. And you're just holding that with like unshakable courage, as you mentioned. For me, that's what defines like the real light leader, because it
Mhm.
is lonely and it is the path where it's like you have least evidence. Is the
Mm.
path where you have least evidence. So you're going to have to be okay. You're not going to be understood. You're going to have to be okay that a lot of the times, the things that we used to relate to people so much, like, oh, things are so hard, right? Yes, things are so hard. And, oh, can you see how everything is getting so expensive? Yeah, everything is getting so expensive. It's like the moment that you become a light leader for real, you don't have room for that anymore.
Yeah.
It's like that's not in integrity with you anymore. So you're not going to be able to participate in these conversations or kind of allow yourself the little pleasure of just connecting with people through misery. You know what I mean? Like, it's
Well,
like,
maybe not pleasure, maybe comfort. Well, and it's
right.
like we're as human beings, like we're wired for connection. We need connection. We want connection, which is why I also feel it's so important to have communities and spaces and also mentors and people that we can connect to who
Yes.
are really resonating similarly and who hold the same values and who are going where we're going, which I know is a big part of what you provide.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, we create these communities. And of course, this is not to say there's no room for grief. It's not like there's
Oh,
room for,
yeah.
the hard
Yeah.
emotions. It's just that,
Humanity.
yeah, there's obviously room for that is, that just to clarify that. But every leader that I've seen at this point that has like come through they had to walk alone for a while. It's almost like an initiation, like
Hmm.
you have to do it alone for a while. Like, yeah, you can have the teachers, you can have like people around you, but in the end of the day, it's really you deciding, like, am I going to hold this? Am I going to really stand for this? Right? Am I going to give my life to this vision? um
Oof.
yeah.
That's really powerful. And I think even if it doesn't necessarily require physical disconnection from certain people, I think there is a place where there's a choice point of like, you know, coming to the conclusion that, I might lose people in my life. Like I might, it's like, oh, I don't know. And am I going to choose it anyway? Am I going to choose it anyway? And that's so powerful. But I think this is really, I'm really grateful this is coming up because I see that this is an area that people struggle with a lot is, relationships. I was a relationship coach
Hmm.
for a number of years before I kind of did what I do now, but I integrate that into my coaching and my mentorship because it's a part of the whole thing, right?
Hmm.
Relationships are so important, I think, when it comes to embodying that leadership frequency that we're talking about. But there is often a period of um, disresonance,
Hmm.
and like you were talking about in your story with like your job, and then there's this thing you're doing on the weekend that can show up for people in different ways. But I find a lot of people are really afraid of stepping out of resonance with people they're connected to, that they're attached to, with situations that they're attached to. It's family relationships, it's all of these things. And so I'm just curious, like, your perspective on that, and especially if anyone is kind of struggling there, because what I've seen is that it causes people to kind of teeter sometimes,
Yes,
where
yes,
it's like they
absolutely.
have this like next level to like step into,
Yeah.
but they're kind of like, oh, I don't know about that. Because like my
Hmm.
human
Hmm.
really wants or my inner child or my nervous system or whatever really wants to keep these connections. And I'm so terrified of the changes that could occur. So, yeah, what's your perspective on that?
Yeah. I mean, like, when you are in the middle of it, right? When you are in the middle of like, there's this big calling, when we can say, like, I have this calling to go full on woo woo, like full on alien, whatever you want to call it, right? Like,
Yeah,
I want to be full on alien, let's say
yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Um, and when you are in the middle of like, oh, I want to do that, but I'm afraid, and there's like this very real fears of, and not being relatable, and people not coming
yeah.
with, and the judgment and all these things. Like, honestly, at that point, you just have to rip the band-aid off. There's no easier way to
Mm,
say it. Like, in my opinion, there is not really a shortcut.
mm,
You just have to come to a place of understanding that the the biggest form of betrayal is betraying yourself.
mm.
And that's like the biggest form of regret is I wasn't real to my desire. I wasn't real to who I was. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And that hurts more. Like, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, that will hurt more than being like, oh, I'm still friends with Sal and John from my high school. Like, like
Yeah.
the feeling of knowing that you betrayed yourself is going to be harder. So knowing that, you just kind of have to rip the band-aid off, and also being on the other side of it and being somebody who went full alien, like on all of my relations. I live a very open, spiritually woo life, like all of my
Yeah.
friends, all of my family, everybody around me knows what I do and knows who I am. And obviously they all must have their own interpretations of it, but to my, to the best of my abilities, I'm real and open with that, is that you always find ways to connect with people as long as you come from your heart and you do not need to be understood. That's a huge key.
Mm,
When you do not need them to understand you for you to be who you are, but you can still love people, there's
mhm.
always a point of connection.
Yeah, beautiful. And how would you say that, like, if someone is struggling with that need for people to understand them, how would
Mm-hmm.
you say that, like, to move through that? What 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 is required for that?
I mean, that's I would think that's shadow work. Like,
Yeah,
why?
right.
Why do you need people to understand you so much?
Yeah.
Like where have you learned that you cannot validate yourself?
Mm,
What's the part of you that needs the self-validation? What's the part of you that needs the self-love? Um, your connection to yourself, your connection to your God, to your spirit, like that's where it would go, because you're not going to find it in other people. You're not going to find your connection to God when another understands you. Like, yes, sometimes, right? Like during healing sessions, we see that a lot. We see a
yeah.
lot of people coming to healing sessions because they want that validation. They want that confirmation of
Right, right.
this is real. And we can give that, a
Yeah,
little bit. But in the end
yeah,
of the day, it's like you have to learn how to self-source that.
yeah.
Um, mhm.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that shadow work is really essential in a lot of these spots. And, I also work with like other timelines and like I was saying, like ancestral distortions and different things. But I think like a lot of the stuff that's benefited me the most in letting go of some of these yeah, places where I was clinging to, you know, that that external validation in a different way is like working with the inner child,
Mhm.
because there's this this pain behind it, like, and there is, like you were saying, like a meaning attached to it. Like, well, it means I'm not gonna be loved, or it means I'm not lovable, or it means I'm alone, just like when I was 3 and I was like
Yeah.
stuck in my room alone and no one was paying attention to me, or whatever the case may be for a person. And so sometimes I think revisiting those wounds and bringing healing to those spaces is just the thing that can shift so much. And
Yeah.
now we have access to teach that divine child a different way that they weren't taught, to introduce them to the frequency, to introduce them to the aspect of us that can be that divine mother for them, or that divine
Mhm.
father for them as we step forward. So I think that's really important, just because I think sometimes people hear stuff like this, like, and people don't explain, it's like, well, you just can't care what other people think. And then it's like, oh, okay, cool, like I will just not do that. But it's like, I don't know how,
Yeah.
so it's important. But this is one of the reasons why I think, like, mentors and healers and, people who can really guide people through their own process with it are so important. It's easy to listen to a podcast and, get
Yeah,
the
for sure.
information mentally, but moving through it on all those levels is a different story.
For sure, yeah, and it's such a part of like the self leadership journey is to see, right, like, oh, this is where I'm keep getting caught up, like
Yeah,
I keep getting caught up on like needing people to understand me. So then
right.
I need to find myself the resources to move through that. So where can I find
Yes.
myself the resources for that? And another thing, that's like in my journey has been very freeing, because I understood that I'm not a hiding person, like I can't really hide, like I don't do it well. Let's start with that. Like if
Yeah.
if I'm feeling sad, you're gonna know that I'm feeling sad.
Yeah, yeah,
Like
yeah,
I
yeah.
can't really
I'm the
mask
same way.
things.
It's like, yeah.
um and one thing that has really helped me at the beginning was trying to understand the other people as much as I could. And that for me
Mm,
was really hard, because I had to go through like all of these layers of self-righteousness and these layers of like, I'm right and they're wrong, like, and all of that. But
mm,
like, it's something that I do. I live in Brazil now, right? I lived in Canada for 10 years, moved back to Brazil, and is the variety of people here in Brazil is incredible. People of
yeah.
different, obviously, social classes and cultures and backgrounds. And so everybody's very different, just in the way that they speak and in the way that they relate to another. And I have found myself like very often having to really like, ground myself and then try to see life through another person's eyes and try to understand
Yeah.
like what is their point of view, right? Like what is going on for them. Um,
Hmm.
and I think sometimes we can really put the focus on, oh, I want to be understood, I want to be understood, but really, am I understanding others? Which I think is another huge skill for the new light leaders, because I don't believe that the light leaders are meant to go around and say, you are wrong and I'm right, and this is the way and my way is the way. Like, that's not compassion. Like,
I
that
agree
doesn't
with that
create
100%.
change.
Yeah.
So if we're going to be leading a movement in the name of love, we're going to learn how to love the things that we disagree with,
Yeah.
and be like, oh, okay, I can see you and I can understand you, and I might think that's bullshit, sorry, excuse me, but I'm still gonna respect you, and I'm still gonna love you, and I'm still gonna do my best to understand your point of view and see that as something very valid as well, you
Yeah.
know
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think like understanding is really a doorway to love and an expression of love. And I think understanding is what generates compassion. I
Mm.
had someone that I've worked with in the past. Her name is Angel Grant, so I just wanted to credit her for saying this. But she said once that compassion is just clear sight.
Yes.
And that I think is just the perfect phrase and definition of compassion. It's just seeing clearly. So when you can see an individual clearly, everything that's going into them making their decisions or perceiving things in a certain way or whatever, there that compassion naturally arises, love naturally arises, our hearts naturally open. It doesn't mean that we're not going to make choices that are in alignment with our highest and best. In fact, we might even be more inclined to do that and to express boundaries or whatever it is that we're meant to do. But I've actually been talking about this for a while now. It's been coming up so much with the people that I'm working with, is like the discernment of the heart.
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
think people don't understand how powerful the heart is and the
Yeah.
level of understanding that is accessible through the heart. People think more about the third eye, or,
Yes.
they think more about this like clear sight being this like, you know, it's
Yeah.
like very mental.
Yes.
And this is where you see people really sorting and really, like you were saying, like getting up and being like, well, this person, this and that person. And like, I mean, there's maybe a place for that, but where I see people really get thrown off is where I see them like disconnected from the power of the heart and the wisdom of the heart, the discernment of the heart, the clear sight of the heart.
Ah, I adore that. I love that you're bringing that up, and I love that you're bringing so much of the heart up, because I really think that like that new earth leadership is a heart led movement.
100%.
It is not a third eye. It is not how, like you went to the 25th dimension and you met with Jesus, and now you are a new earth leader. Like, that's not, like, this is just like upper chakra stuff, right? Like, but
Yeah,
new earth leadership for me happens in the heart. That's the point of connection. That's where
absolutely.
we're bridging heaven with
Absolutely.
earth. That's where we're bridging, is through the heart. So yeah.
Yeah, I
Hmm.
couldn't agree more. It is the bridge. It is where all things meet. It is where all polarities meet. It is like this is the this
Yes.
is the point of power. Um,
Mm.
and I think just the heart is really, I've come to understand that it's very misunderstood. Ironically, with what we were talking about with misunderstanding, there's a lot of misconception about what it means to be heart led or to be a heart led leader. People tend to equate that with this kind of fluffy,
Mm.
almost codependent, like bypassy, overly empathetic in a way that negates boundaries, like non-discerning way of sort of being. And I think that couldn't be further from the truth.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
think it's a big I think it's a big distortion, and it really prevents people from accessing the power that's there. Um, and of course, just on a frequency level, I mean, that's fifth dimensional consciousness. Like that's what we're here to transmit and anchor in. So yeah, so important for leaders to be connected with their hearts.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. And yeah, I think that's the a big part of the work for a lot of leaders at this point is like that heart-led connection. So because there's so much that comes with it, right? Like there's the understanding of true vulnerability, which
Mm,
is an essential aspect of, living through the heart. And I think you can only really understand vulnerability when you are coming from a place of safety, when you have established yourself as safe in the world. Um, yeah. So I think there's so much work being done around that. And I think, that is the one thing, if we had to say, how do you start embodying new earth leadership, right? Like if you call yourself a new earth leader, then how do you start? Like what's the first step is, can you be safe on yourself enough to open your heart?
yes. Yes, yes, that's huge. And there's levels and layers to that, like you were saying. And we've built walls and we have different programs and we have different fears. And of course, fear is on the opposite end of the vibrational scale to love. And
Mhm.
so, those fears get to be moved through and transmuted, and hopefully we can do that in a safe place with really skilled and attuned, loving human
Yeah.
beings to help us through that, to begin to really feel safe to open that. But I really see that as the key and the pathway.
Yeah, and so often, like the most beautiful work just happens in the heart-filled space, right? Like
Yes.
I'm all for the techniques, I'm all for the methodologies, like I'm all for all these beautiful new earth levels of creation that are coming online, and also like the simplicity of love to love, heart to heart,
Yeah.
connection to connection is like that can't really be overlooked either. Like that is a
No,
superpower by
definitely
itself.
not.
That's a high level technology by itself, you
Oh
know.
yeah. Oh my gosh. I would even say the highest, to be honest. Like that's the highest tech there is. But it's like, and I love all the other stuff too. And some of the stuff that I do is really out there, and like all the things. But I think like the people who are doing different modalities involving different tech, there's a way to engage with those things that are more disconnected from the heart
Yeah.
field.
Yeah.
And there can be a lot of distortion with that, like you were talking about.
Yes.
You were joking about like the 25D, and like I did this and I'm gonna, it's like that can go into a place where I'm like, I'm not interested in that,
Hmm.
because it's
Hmm.
devoid of heart. Like, or this person or
Yes.
this teacher, you can feel that they're disconnected from their heart. And I can't do it. Even if the information they're sharing is objectively accurate,
Yes.
it's like I just can't engage with it.
Absolutely. And I think that's a filter that's just coming like clearer and clearer and clearer for people, like the discernment
Yeah.
from the heart that you were talking about. I think that's becoming very clear.
Yeah.
Uh, is a world of difference between, yeah, when somebody is leading with the heart versus somebody's leading with, their wisdom or their solar plexus, like that,
Yeah.
strong power. Like nothing wrong with any of that by all means. But I do believe that we're coming together and the new earth leaders are starting to really form because we're becoming one heart, right? So
Yes.
it is this is what's really leading now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's new earth leadership. Oh, that's new earth.
Yes.
Old earth might be too much like solar plexus or just wisdom. Like new earth is heart. Yeah. I
Yes.
love
And
that.
all of the other things, like all of the other beautiful energy centers, all of the other beautiful faculties that we have, all of the other tools that we have available to us, like are important and needed and get to still be there, but it all needs to be filtered, like you were saying, and integrated through the heart.
Hmm. Hmm.
That's how I really feel.
Yeah. That's where we create the field. Oh, so beautiful, Julia.
Yeah, I'm
Love
so
this.
glad we're so aligned on this. I'm just like, I can really feel the resonance in that you really get it. And I think this is such an important conversation for people. It's also kind of pinging me to like, you need to really talk more about this publicly, Julia, because I'm talking about it in my private containers. I think I need to talk more about it, out in the open. So here we are. Um, I wanted to ask you one more thing, kind of to kind of it's kind of a different topic, but um, I know we were speaking a little bit about this on our own, but I loved what you were bringing forward around manifestation. I know that you are kind of a manifestation expert, and like I was saying, I definitely, have adventured there and taught some from there, but it's not necessarily my biggest thing. And um,
Mhm.
you know, we were talking about the evolution of manifestation. And I think it really ties into what we're talking about with the heart field too,
Mhm.
and manifestation from ego or mind
Mhm.
versus soul manifestation. So I wondered if you could just speak into that for a moment here.
Yeah, for sure. I'm gonna speak to like what I remember and what I think is relevant right now. But
Yeah.
after the conversation, I was like, I should have written that. That was amazing. Like, why
Yeah.
didn't I record
It
that?
was so good.
So if you remember, like, please bring it up as well, because I
Okay.
would.
Okay. Okay.
Um, but just to give a little bit of like what's my take on manifestation and why manifestation matters. I see manifestation as a tool for planetary transformation. We are, as humans, we're developing new skills, like literally new skills, abilities that we previously didn't have. And that has happened to humans through the course of humanity. At some point, we didn't know how to speak, and then we developed the ability to speak. And look how much further have we come as a humanity, as a species, because of that ability, right?
Yeah.
So we have developed multiple skills that we previously didn't have through the course of history. And manifestation is one of those skills, which is nothing more than the ability to know how to manipulate, I'm going to use that word, reality to look like, an expression of your deeper values, to
Mm,
look like something that's more aligned with who you are and with your heart. So that being said, manifestation is the art of understanding how to shape reality at your will. And obviously that can be used, the intention behind that is huge, right? Because you can use that with an intention that can be quite nefarious and that will work. And we are seeing live right now, I believe, like systems, greater minds, whatever you want to call them, that really understand the power of collective manifestation and really understand the power of
oh,
creation.
100%. Yes.
And they're very deliberately manifesting a new reality through the collective mind.
Yes.
It's very, very clear to see that happening, you know?
Yes.
So it can be used by those means, but it can also be used to manifest a reality of love, peace, and harmony. I think where people get really caught up is when you start making manifestation an external only process,
Mm,
which means manifestation is only valid to the extent that it shows up in my physical reality.
mm,
And it stops being about a state of being, but it becomes like purely about a thing that I need to have to prove myself worth it, or
mm,
prove myself capable, or prove myself something.
mm.
Because what I've seen through my journey of manifestation is, like I'm really good at like manifesting physical, like real things, but really like they feel quite empty after a while.
Yeah.
Like the physical things, like they're fun, but if they are not with a context behind it, like money, for an example, if all I want is to manifest the next $10,000, I'll probably manifest the next $10,000. I'll manifest the number that I'll ask, I'll get it, and then that's gonna feel fun for a little bit, and then I'm gonna need another 10K to
Hmm.
feel that rush again. Because
Or
if
30K
they
or 50K or 150K. Yeah.
if the intention is not clear, because if the
Yes.
intention is on like that thing, it's just it loses its thing, like is excitement very fast. But there is a something to be said about like manifesting the feeling of true abundance,
Yeah.
manifesting being the evidence of heaven on earth with all that comes with it. Like there's a context that is stronger behind it. And in the context of abundance, 10K is abundance, as much as this smoothie that I'm drinking is abundance, as much as like life is just becomes abundance. Yeah. But we were talking, there was something deeper that we talked
Yeah.
about that I was
Well,
like,
it's
oh, that was
such
so good.
I think it's still really beautiful what you're talking about. It's such a different orientation, but I know we were talking a little bit about yeah, just kind of like the experience of getting caught up, and we were talking about our beloved industry, the coaching industry,
Right.
the healing industry, and kind of the experience of getting caught up in um yeah, like that external goal, like the
Yeah.
10K months or whatever it is. And the experience a lot of people have of actually like reaching those milestones
Yeah.
and then being like, "Oh, is this it?"
Hmm.
Like this doesn't
Hmm.
necessarily feel how I thought it was going to feel, And so changing the way that we are orienting towards what we're manifesting, to be in alignment also with the deeper desire of the soul. So we were talking about like
Yeah.
ego desire, right, in quotes, versus
Yeah.
like soul desire, because you may think that you want a certain thing. And this is also where I feel like some people get stuck in manifestation because they're like, why is it not manifesting? And it's like, well, is your soul choosing
Yeah. And
it?
this absolutely. And this has been a practice for me that like I'm going through it right now because as you know, my life is about to change drastically, right? Like
Yeah.
so I'm going through this right now, which is asking myself, like, what do I want? And then listen to the
Mm,
answers. And then like letting that percolate, letting that pass, do not attach to that at all. And then ask again, what do I want?
mm,
And see if the answer changed. And then letting that percolate and do not be attached to that at all. And then asking again, what do I want? And I'm finding that with each layer of the question, I discover deeper and deeper what's really important to me.
yeah.
And not, like what I want because is what I've seen on social media, what I want because is what the coach industry wanted, what I want because of all the things, we have become very stuck, I believe, in wanting things that are not ours to want.
Mm,
That's not really
yes.
important to us to want,
Yes, that's
you
not
know?
really the deeper thing, the deeper desire. And I love this conversation. I'm desire motivated in human design. I don't know if you know that system or the motivation involved, but like desire is like I feel like it's so incredibly powerful as a creative source. And
Yeah.
I find that a lot of times, we're attaching to a thing that isn't the thing. And it's like, well, what part of me wants that? you know I mean, you could say the ego, but it can also be like an inner child who's trying to get a
Yeah.
need met in a kind of backwards way, or it's like, if I get this, then it means this, but it's coming from a wound.
Yeah.
um and I love this practice you suggested as well. Go ahead.
No, and that's what I'm finding. Like the true wants for me, like when I know that is like a true want, like first, there's not a lot of words around it. It's very simple. It's like
Yeah,
actually very simple. It's like a feeling is a
it's like a
frequency, but
feeling.
it's very simple. And the second thing is that it is really not about anybody else
Yeah.
but me. Like there is this sense of like true sovereignty with this desire, like this is really something that's like preciously mine and it's
Yes.
not for anybody else, really. Like it's not for my husband, it's not for my future children. It's like it's you know um
Mm.
is that intimacy I find is like that when you're so intimate with that desire that is so yours, like
Yes.
that's when like that's what I truly want, that's what I'm manifesting.
Yeah, that's how you know. Yes, you feel it. It's like there's a sense of like feeling it in the cells of your body, like, you're feeling it really deeply in your field in a way that is like so connected to the deeper piece of you. It's not
Yeah.
about anyone else. It's not about, it's just
Yeah.
um it comes from that deeper place inside. And I think, yeah, I think that is so, so valuable for people to start to connect to, so they could do that practice. I actually had a friend of mine and someone that I worked with a few years ago who she has an exercise that I love of writing down. Her name is Margaret Burns, but you do like 3 pages in a journal, and
Mm-hmm.
you fill up the first page with just like what I want is, and then you fill it in, fill it in, fill it in, fill it in. And then the second page is what I really want is, fill it in, fill it in, fill it in, fill it in. The
Mm-hmm.
third page is what I really, really want, right? And so you're going through like all these things. And
Delays,
the
yes.
first layers are like, oh, well, I want $1 million. I want a partner. I want a boyfriend that understands me. Like I want whatever like the most surface kind of mental
Mhm.
things are. And then it starts to almost like run out of gas. Like it
Yes.
runs out of steam and it's like, oh, there's no
Yes.
more there. So then we have to go a little bit deeper, and then like stuff starts coming up from inside, you know.
Mm-hmm.
This
Mm-hmm.
exercise is actually how I realized that I wanted to be a mother. That
Oh.
came out of me, and I was like, did not know that. Okay. Like that's not something that
Oh.
my mind was like, it wasn't an idea that I had, that it's like, oh, when I get this, then like my life, it wasn't attached to my identity at the time, like nothing like that. It was this deeper thing that came through. But as soon as I said it, it was like, oh shit. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's really it.
Mm-hmm.
That's a true desire.
Yeah, and right? Like like now I got to the true desire. Now
Yes.
I really like nailed it.
Yes.
And again, like New Earth leadership, we will need to get in touch with that, to have that level of intimacy with our desires to get to that level, because it is through the desires that we also explore our gifts, that we discover
Yes.
what our gifts are, that we're serving the world with, right? Like whether your gift
Yes.
is to be a mother, which for many of us that is, that's a gift, that's a skill,
Right.
that's uniquely yours. Um, and I think that that's that purification that's happening right now to get
Yes.
us back to that place, so we can lead from that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and also as you were talking about, it's 12/12 right now. That's my birthday.
Oh,
So it's like
congratulations! That's
a
amazing.
number sync that, comes through for me. But uh yeah, and I think when you were talking about the vision, that, just bringing it all the way back to the very beginning, your definition of leadership, of holding that vision, it's like to be able to connect with that vision that is pure and that is true, that is really ours. That purification of the desires and the ability to manifest is
Mm-hmm.
so important.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because when we are in that state, like manifestation does sort of become second nature, right? Like,
Yes,
and it is a powerful tool. Manifestation is a powerful tool. Let's not get this wrong.
absolutely.
You can manifest health for people, you can manifest resources for yourself and for others, like you can manifest
Yes,
things for your neighborhood, you can manifest changes in like
yes,
laws, regulations that will bring the world forward. Like there's a lot of really incredible things that we can manifest that go beyond, like the $10,000 months or whatever the things that we were talking about. So in my opinion, it's very valid to understand the skill,
yeah,
and just as a skill to use it, like when when it applies to you, when it's
yes,
supportive of you, instead of blaming manifestation for being something that is not, but that the intentions behind it might have made it become. Does that
yes,
make
yes.
sense?
Yes, it's really
Yeah.
important with a lot of these things, because I think there is this heightening of discernment, and there's like veils falling away, and there's like things where people are noticing like, oh, there's some like distortion there or whatever. It's really important not to throw the baby out with the bathwater with a
Yes.
lot of these things. You know what I mean? It's not like, oh, manifestation is just like complete BS and like we should never do it because it's totally messed up. It's
Exactly.
no, that's not, like it's our, I see it, I believe it's our responsibility as leaders to sort through the nuances
Yes.
of these topics and these energetics and these principles and these teachings, to be able to see like what is true and aligned and that I want to align my energy with, and like what is not. But it's not about, just throwing everything out and just, I'm just gonna go back to 3D.
Yeah, exactly.
Screw this. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, I could talk to you forever. I might need to have you back on, because
Yay, I'm totally down for that.
I love chatting with you so much, Carlini. And I want to ask, first of all, is there anything else that's coming through that you feel like, is just a message that you really want to share before we close out?
Oh, I just want to say to anybody who is listening, thank you so much for being here because I know that if you are listening to this conversation, right, to this cosmic conversation, you have had a huge journey in your own life and there has been many things that have happened to you to get you to the point of being open to these ideas. So, thank you to all the listeners for your service to the world in whatever way you do your service. And thank you as well, Julia, for this wonderful conversation that truly warms my heart. It's such a pleasure to be with you, and so nice to meet such a fellow light leader for real.
Oh my gosh, likewise. It's just a kindred type of energy, and I'm so, so grateful for our connection, so grateful for having you on. And yes, also grateful to all the listeners for continuing to show up on this path, doing the work, and tuning in and receiving. So, Carlini, could you tell our listeners if they want to get in touch with you, where to find you?
So Facebook is kind of like my house, is where I like to hang out. So you can just search for Carolini Arco or Caroline. It's spelled like Caroline, even though I don't like that pronunciation, but you can say
Yeah.
Caroline Arco, and you're gonna find me in there. On Instagram, I am Arco Teachings. So ARCO Teachings. And yeah, you can find me there as well.
Arco
And
teachings.
just send me a message, like I don't bite. I'm a pretty welcoming
She's
human
very
being.
sweet,
So
I promise. Um, yeah, and I'll have all the links in the show notes for you guys. And yeah, the spelling of the name is one reason why I messed it up in the beginning, which I don't
that's
feel
totally
great
okay.
about, but
Don't worry.
it's been such an incredible pleasure, Carolini. I hope to have you on again. Thank you so much. And thank you guys for listening.
Thank you so much. Have a beautiful day.
Hmm.